tell us a little bit about Cruise. Like, just give us an intro.
Sam, why don't you talk about it?
I guess a couple of years ago, let me start over. Me and Mark went to college together, and we've both sort of been in the industry in different capacities ever since then. But neither of us had done a lot of sort of narrative work of our own before. And a few years ago, we thought, let's try it. Let's do something. And the next conversation is, what can we do? And that led to, what can we shoot in one room? And then we thought, what would be something fun that would happen in one room? And beyond the sort of, practical reasons for making it, I think that we're both really drawn to the sort of what ifs and the sort of there's so much in the world that we take for granted, and then when you think about it, you're like, what, why is that like that? Spam calls are a perfect example of like, who would do that? Why would you do that? What's the game here? Like, hey, is this working? So it just sort of sprung naturally from that. And I think that it's really a movie about hating your job. I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, unfortunately. And it sort of just came together, and it was a lot of fun.
Great. Were there any films that inspired the movie?
I would say, I don't know about specific films, to be honest, but certainly filmmakers. There's a lot of Terry Gilliam in there, specifically Brazil, I would say. Just in that kind of Kafkaesque, awful bureaucratic kind of environment.
We took inspiration also from Burn After Reading, just in terms of like the look. A lot of the stuff what Sam was saying is not necessarily based on a particular movie, or it's more like the filmmakers and the looks that they've crafted that we kind of like took inspiration from, and then presented it in the short itself.
Yeah, I got you there. I can see both of those aspects of both of those films in there for sure. So one of the things that I noticed when I was watching it, and I really want to know if this was on purpose or not, because the way it comes together is so fantastically beautiful, is the idea that you've got this dark office setting, just tonally just morose, right? And they're selling this dream package, this luxury Hawaiian sort of package, and there's sort of this depression versus anti-depression thing going on. And I was wondering, was that part of the deal with, like, were you thinking of like, where's the best escapism on this end? Or
we definitely liked the contrast of it, and there is something, we didn't have to do a lot because it's a real thing that happens to people. And it is funny how we live in this world where you regularly get calls with what sounds like on paper should be amazing news, and your reaction is just like, oh God, no. So that's that. We can't take credit for it because it was just already there, but that was, I think, something that drew us to sort of the sort of dark comic elements of it, was that contrast of having this thing that is, in the abstract, a tropical sunny getaway, but the way that we all sort of experience it in most of our lives is through these very like, what the hell phone calls. That was definitely something that drew us to it, and I think was a big part of why we chose this particular terrible thing to make the movie about.
I would also say, Sean, just on that, to add to Sam's point, is that in terms of the set design, I think like also that you were remarking about the jury room, and we took a lot of inspiration from, like Sam was saying, like you do travel agencies of that. So like things like the posters that are inside there being the ones where it's like a beautiful beach scene or a sunset, or all the colors of the tickets or the pamphlets are all like pink and beautiful and this, and it's all like based off of like really tropical like settings. of what you would see in a typical travel agency, right? But essentially from that, it's aside from that, you just have like the rest of it being this like huge contrast of a dreariness of the world that they live in.
We had a really wonderful production designer, Rebecca Petro, who we basically said we wanted to feel a little bit like a travel agency, but also like a prison. And she did just an incredible job of bringing that to life.
That's a perfect assessment too, because that was the first thing I got was it feels like a prison, you know, especially with the gunman, you know, just sitting right there. I love the fact that termination kind of has a dual meaning in the sense, and it really feels like it's the best metaphor for stress ever is having that gunman sitting there just with him. Stress wise, how do you think that's messing with the telemarketer Mark's head?
Yeah, it's messing with him a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think what, you know, I mentioned that it's sort of all about the experience of hating your job, and I think most people can probably relate to the experience of having a job that feels totally meaningless and you're totally mistreated at, but you need it. And the only reason you take a job like that is because you need it. And that's, you know, sort of, you know, without diving into too much of a rant, you know, that's why capitalism stinks, because the people at the bottom just get, you know, crushed under heel. And it's the people who need the jobs the most, who are often in the jobs where they're mistreated in the worst ways and made to feel like they have no margin for error. You know, so, you know, if you've ever, you know, worked a terrible job where you're serving or pushing a broom or something, your boss always, you know, makes you feel like it's the end of the world with every little mistake. And we sort of wanted to evoke that kind of feeling of, I don't even want to be here, but I feel like, you know, if I mess up, something terrible is going to happen to me, because it's just so unfair. But yet it's a situation that, you know, probably the majority of people find themselves in.
Obsolete items come up a lot. The phone book, the phone itself. Was there anything to that, or was that just part of the production design for, like you said, for like Brazil and stuff?
It was, again, a combination of sort of practical and creative things that went into that. A lot of it had to do with just the choreography of the action itself, where if we set this in the real world, you know, it would just be a guy with a headset on at a computer, and it just didn't, and we really wanted that action of the hanging up the phone and the clock dinging, and it felt like things had a lot more impact if we had sort of those motions and those things, you know, happening. And there's also something just more tactile in general about, you know, using that sort of 80s, 90s era technology. And beyond that, it, you know, it's obviously not existing in the real world. You know, it's a metaphor. So giving it sort of a sense of unreality and taking it out of a specific time and place was something that was important to us in just sort of world building, or whatever you want to call it, I guess. Because if we, you know, if you did see, you know, an iPhone or something like that, it sort of makes you think, wait, like, is this supposed to actually be happening or not? So it was just sort of a little bit of a shortcut to get people to suspend disbelief a little bit more. And then once we got production design involved, we fell in love with the look of it. And yeah.
Especially the clock. The clock was like a key aspect that me and Sam went back on probably, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 times of what is the right clock. And then eventually what we settled on was kind of a mixture of practical element and digital element to make it work of that. So it really helped in terms of, for example, you'll see the people who are watching it, there's kind of this like dark red writing or numbers that kind of pop up on the clock. And as they do that, it really gets a sense of adding to the dread, and that really helps like create the world and create it be more fantastical in terms of what Sam was saying. It really kind of separates it, is that it's like you immediately identify with like, all right, he's only got X amount of chances in terms of this.
You do mention a Gmail address at one point, though. Maybe that was just bad writing on my part, but otherwise we've pretty much kept things pretty agnostic.
We should have put it as an AOL message, and then it would have been perfectly fine. You know,
PO box or something might have been better.
I don't think you have to worry too much on that end, because I mean, some of those places, especially like we're talking about obsolescence, right? Let's face it, a lot of spam calls are obsolete at this point. They need to try new tactics anyway, so it's kind of all comes together in that aspect. My last question for you guys is a fun one. What are the worst jobs you ever had?
Oh, Sam, do you want to use? I can go if you want to go first. I can go.
You can go first.
I had one summer where I call it like my worst summer ever, where I basically worked 8 or 9 of the worst jobs you could possibly imagine, and it would be because I worked for an employment agency. They would send me out on different things. So every 2 weeks I'd complete the job and they'd send me out to something else, which got worse and worse as the summer went on. So it started out working for an aviation company and basically moving boxes from one small store to the next, literally next store over that. It was like dreadful and boring. And then it was doing landscaping, and then it was doing dishwashing, and then it was doing like any type. And I worked a little bit of telemarketing, and it was just basically like I got every single worst job over in one particular summer.
Mine was also a summer job. When I was maybe 18, I grew up in New York, and I had a job selling comedy tickets in Times Square, which was, I mean, just being in Times Square is like existing inside of a headache, and having to approach strangers and try and sell them stuff was really not my cup of tea. So yeah, that would probably take the cake.
I think the reason that this movie really resonated with me is one, I worked in a call center about a year ago, and it was literally the worst job of my life. So I can definitely relate to the idea of metrics and all of that being sort of looming over you like having a gun to your head.
One thing, Sean, that we always talk about is that we always want people who see this film to essentially think, what did I just do by hanging up on this telemarketer? You know, what actions did I are gonna be like, and basically befall this, you know, pretty nice person who's just trying to do their job. But what we just want them to think about that essentially once they hang up on any future calls once they see this film.